Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thursday, January 16th, 2020. A very warm welcome. This is our second webinar of the year, and I think it probably brings me to say good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are listening around the world. We're with TBAT this morning, and we're going to be talking about funding innovation. So a practical guide to fund R&D is our session, and we're broadcasting live from our media suite here in the Thames Valley. We're here on the trading estate, in fact, and interestingly, the trading estate here, the Slough Trading Estate, world famous, celebrates its centenary year. So great place to be. I'm Gavin Spencer. I'm a head of membership here. I'm going to be working alongside our presenter today from TBAT, who's Sam Stevens. And we've got a really interesting setup for you today. So let me say welcome, Sam, and tell us a bit about yourself and about TBAT.
Okay, thank you, Gavin. Yes, Sam Stevens here. So I was a founding director of TBAT back in 2002, and my career has really been around engineering. So repairing nuclear submarines, working on gas turbine development for big power engines, power stations, and also aerospace as well. I worked for Rolls-Royce before I went into consultancy. And 2002, set my own business up with a couple of other guys. Our focus of the business is all around innovation in any size of company. And that might be on the grant side, it might be on the R&D tax side, it might be about equity funding for new start companies or companies who really want to expand quickly. So it's all around money, it's all about innovation, and it's great fun.
Fantastic. Okay, so what sounds like a really interesting subject. We've got a lot to cover, but today we're going to be talking about R&D, but not just R&D, research and development. We're going to be talking about the key sources of funding, basically to help companies innovate and grow. So we'll be covering everything, as I say, from R&D. We'll be talking about seed funds and a range of other funding streams. There'll be some case studies thrown in. By all means, there's the opportunity for you guys to ask questions. So there's a chat facility here. So if you can use the chat facility, you can ask us questions. We can either answer them live as we move through, or we'll batch them up and deal with them at the end. So this webinar is set to take place for an hour. And I think what we'll do, we'll hand straight over to Sam and kick off from here.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Gavin. So yeah, please send your questions in. I'll probably take them as we go along, so therefore it's kind of pertinent to the bit in the presentation. This was taken by a colleague of mine who was at a rail event. And what you find at rail events is you get a lot of the older generation who have perhaps retired, still like to think they're involved, but they too tend to get a little bit tired. And this was not one of my presentations. I think this was all to do with rail safety. And the guy in the picture there is obviously a bit fatigued after a busy day walking around the exhibition. So we don't want you to do that. Hopefully we're going to make this a fast-paced presentation. It's going to be gripping, and it's hopefully a subject that's close to everybody's heart, because it's all about money and money to make innovation happen. Okay, personally, I believe the UK is an absolutely fabulous place to innovate and to grow your business. And successive governments, over whatever colour you like, have improved the landscape for companies. And I do it as a bit of a circle here. So to get things started, people often start a company with the 3Fs, friends, fools and family, to invest in their little startup companies. But really what you can do is use two schemes called SEIS and EIS, which I've got a slide on later. And that's to get equity funding into your company at a really beneficial rate for your investors. And it does make the investment look very attractive, investing in new start companies. R&D grants, they sort of pump prime the innovation. So here you get funding from typically a government source, which brings money into your company as you deliver your innovation project. R&D tax credits are all around your end of year accounts, and it's a way of rewarding you for having innovated. So it's retrospective. It's really there to reduce your tax bill. But in certain situations, if you're sort of break even, but you've done a lot of R&D, you can actually get cash back from the tax man, which is quite a novel experience.
Yeah, that's the bit I'm interested in, because kind of R&D kind of brings to mind, you know, images of guys with beards in, you know, scientists and white socks and sandals and all that kind of thing. But it's not, you know, it's not all science based, is it? There are there are funds available. You can claim back for B2B organisation professional services. So
Yeah.
really interesting element. I'm looking forward to hearing about there.
Yeah, lots of interesting stuff there. And then finally, quite a few years ago, I think it's probably about 8 years ago, Patent Box came along. And this was basically to say, if you get a patent on a piece of technology, when you sell an item with that bit of technology in it, you can halve the tax bill for the sale of that. So you might develop a new microphone, you put it into a telephone. If every telephone that you sell has got that microphone in it, you only pay 10% corporation tax instead of 19-20%. There's only 1,500 companies in the whole of the UK have bothered with Patent Box. When it first came out, I might not bother doing this at the end of the day, I'll talk about it now. It was quite a straightforward process. Other countries got annoyed with how promising it was for companies to use this in the UK, and they thought it was unfair. So they've really made it a lot stricter, a lot more bureaucracy, and hence there's only 15 companies in the whole of the UK bothering with Patent Box. But it is a way of rewarding commercialisation. Okay, we'll move on. So on the investment side, there's two key schemes. There is a venture capital scheme, so that's when you're after more money and you're not going with sort of private investors and small consortium of investors. Venture capital is where you're actually going to some of the big funds. So SEIS is the Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme. It's for new start companies. It's up to 150k of investment. You can talk to HMRC to get pre-approval that your round of funding actually meets their requirements. And essentially what it means is for every pound that an investor puts into your company, they can take 50p off their tax bill for that year. So their investment is only costing them 50%.
Wow.
So, you may want 100k, you get 3 or 4 people all chipping in 25k each. It's only cost them 12.5 grand. So it is a fantastic way to get that early investment. I say it's only up to 150k. I think you have to be less than 3 years old to get this, and you have to spend the money quite quickly. You can't roll it over 5 years to spend it. It's kind of spent in the first year. And what's also good about this scheme and the Enterprise Investment Scheme is when you come to realise that investment, and so they sell out to a huge international, or you sell your shares, your capital gains exempt, which means instead of paying 28%, I think you actually pay nothing, or you might just pay 10%. I can't quite remember how that works, but so it's a great scheme. It only costs you half of the money to invest, and you don't pay as much capital gains tax when you actually realise the investment. Enterprise Investment Scheme on the right hand side of the screen there. It's not, but it is for bigger sums of money. It's meant to be a slightly less risk investment for people, and it's really for more established companies looking to move to the next level where, they may not want to go to the bank, they want to get external investment in, but actually make a significant step change. And, you can have up to 12 million in the lifetime of the company. So really useful funding for companies, both of these. And certainly if you're a new start company, SEIS is a great way to actually get yourself up and running. Okay. The next kind of dozen slides are all around grants. And what we like about grants is it's free money.
Oh, we all like a bit of that.
We like free money. Of course, if you actually spend that on a holiday in the Caribbean, instead of spending it on your innovation, then they generally do not claw it back. We've got one case at the moment, company's doing quite well, they've got an innovation grant, they ran out of money in the company, had to go to the receivers, had to go into administration. They will not have to pay back what they've already had from Innovate UK, because they accept that they've been investing in R&D up until that moment. They can't make any more claims, but that money is being spent by Innovate UK. It's that company's, even though they've gone down the pan. Most companies, they do deliver and they get all the grant that they're expecting, which is great. So free money, and there's really two main clumps here. There's kind of UK ones, which are predominantly, if not Innovate UK funding, Innovate UK run the scheme. So money might come in from a Department of Energy. Innovate UK will run it, but they're distributing Department of Energy funds as opposed to their own bucket of money. Innovate UK, by the way, get about £600 million a year. They invest kind of 250 million on the different catapult centres. So there's we've got the advanced manufacturing one up near us. There's a offshore renewable energy catapult. There's a composites one. There's some biomedical ones. They're dotted around the country, and they get kind of £20 million a pop to further what they're doing. And they are great places to go to work with a group of companies. Maybe not funded, but you actually get to meet all the right people, and the catapults have got facilities to kind of get those products developed and all the rest of it. Really worth looking at. So Innovate UK, the other half of their money, they kind of spend on supporting different grant schemes, and we'll come on to those in a bit. Over on the right hand side, Horizon 2020, up until the end of this month, we can still apply for those. I've got a slide on that later on. Brexit will have an impact on this, and I'll come on to that. So yeah, let's do that. So post-Brexit, Horizon 2020 is a circa €60 billion pot of money to promote innovation in Europe. Other countries can join that from outside of Europe. So Israel, Switzerland is one. Australia often joins in on these. And so other outside countries can join in, which is where we will be. So what Horizon 2020 does, they have all these different technology areas and themed areas, and they're all around improving the quality of life and the economic growth of the European Union. So when you put in an application, you might be just purely UK traditionally. It needs to have a European reach, so all of Europe, and you need to prove that you can exploit it across Europe. So doing something specifically UK-wise would not cut the mustard. And ideally, they want you to work with other European partners. Post-Brexit, there are some of the competitions that they run where they can, you can have this third country title. So companies and organisations from a third country, which is what we will be. So the UK would be funding its own organisations to take part in these calls. So it won't be Horizon 2020 money, but you will be working under one of their competitions with people and organisations and companies and universities who are part of the Horizon 2020 group. So it means I would have preferred a better option than that from an innovation perspective, because unless we're part of the European innovation group, we're going to be struggling to compete longer term on innovative products and services. So it's great that we can still take part as a third country. It really, I'm hoping for after 2020, when they come up with the next round of European funding, the UK government decides to be a bigger player in it and contribute a proper amount of money, and then we can take part in all competitions.
Fantastic.
Even though we're not in Europe, we can still do that. We can still invest in it if you like. We could previously look at things called the SME instrument and the fast track to innovation, where single companies could apply €2.5–3 million, that sort of price tag. Really, really competitive competitions. Typically only 2 or 3% of all applications get funded.
Oh, wow.
So amazingly competitive. So we've been quite successful at putting companies through this. Yeah, they're just really tough. And on all of the competitions within Horizon 2020, you get feedback. So you put your application in, you will get feedback, but it's absolutely pants. They score it across 3 questions, and they're scored between 1 and 5, and the feedback says 3, adequate.
Wow.
4, more than adequate. 5, great. And so there is no proper feedback to allow you to build on what you've done. And I'll come on to why I'll mention that in a minute. So European stuff will still be available to us. It is going to be a little bit limited as to which calls we can go into, but we can apply as a third country. So that is quite good news, really.
Fantastic. And if you've just joined us, just as a recap, we're talking about the sources of funding to help companies innovate and grow. If you do have any questions, there's a live chat box. Feel free to submit those questions. You're tuned into the Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce. Gavin Spencer here with Sam Stevens from TBAT. So sorry to interrupt there, Sam.
No, fine. Right. So now we're going to look at the Innovate UK is the main place in the UK. So they run a whole bunch of funded programs. So SMART, in true government of any colours way forward, they used to be SMART grants, used to be run locally through the regional development agencies. And then they went to Innovate UK to run when it was the Technology Strategy Board, now Innovate UK. Then they called them Open Grants. And after a big branding exercise, they've recalled them Smart Grants. So well done them. Utter waste of money. Why didn't we just call it a Smart Grant all the way along? What has fundamentally changed in the last 2 years with that is when it was Open Grants, they had 5 themes that they repeated twice a year, because a good government department does like to have a bit of a break at Christmas and in the summer. So they couldn't run 12 competitions, they only ran 10. And so they were kind of every month, one of these would come out, and it might be emerging technologies, it could be manufacturing, blah, blah, blah. They've done away with that, and they've put all the money into Smart Grants. And now there's typically 4 calls a year, and they have about 25 million best in each call. So 100 million pounds a year. The slight problem with the Smart Grant is that every technology can apply into it. So you've got to have a really strong project. What Innovate UK do, often through what's called SBRI, they're down at the bottom, Small Business Research Initiative, they will have targeted ones. So they might launch one around making professional services more efficient. And there might be something in there for improving accountancy, improving insurance, improving blah, blah, blah. Smaller competitions, typically 100% funded though. And they're actually not a grant, they're actually a contract to deliver a piece of R&D that the company retains the IP on. But Innovate UK will run that, but you're better off applying into those, because it's, you know, I want to do a bit of a black box technology for insurance, putting it into Smart, I might get supported. Doing it into a specific core that is there to improve the insurance industry, I'm a lot more on the money. I can pitch it straight in at what they're after. So looking for themed competitions is quite good. Innovation loans, we love these. I think they're about 4.5% interest rate. They don't want personal guarantees. What they're looking for is a hold on the IP or actually company assets, but not personal guarantees like a lot of banks want. Quite a process. You have to do the technology side of an application and also the business side and the cash flow. But quite a few companies are getting those now, and they are a great way. They see it as a slightly risk loan, because you're trying to exploit the technology that you've developed, as opposed to it's day to day. I just want to grow my business and make it better and grow it quicker. It's there for you to bridge what's called the valley of death between innovation grants and actually commercialisation, and they're there to get you across that barren landscape of funding. The Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund is a piece of funding on top of their normal Innovate UK cash. And so honchos from industry, from government, from academia all get together and they go, where does the UK need to invest its innovation monies in? How well do we compete with these different technologies against Europe, against the rest of the world? Where do we have skills within the country, be it in universities or companies, to do it? And they've come up with a series of technology areas that funding is for, and I'll come on to that later. Innovate UK also run theme competitions and some other bits of so I'll move on. So hopefully this will fire up. Yeah, there we go. So this is a map of 20 years of grant funding, and you can see that it's got sectors and the colours. So it takes a while to run, but you can actually see some bits and bobs cropping up. Some of the earlier stuff would have been funded through the regional development agencies, so it's typically split within the regions. But what is obvious here is that the main cities do get the bulk of it, with London getting an awful lot of funding. You can see there's a cluster around Cambridge, around Oxford. Southampton actually bats above its weight. Bristol. The top right there, I think, is there's renewables centre there for testing offshore wind turbines and subsea turbines. So they might have had quite a lot of money. You can just see over in Glasgow creeping up. So
what would be classed under the non-core activity? So obviously that's starting to now rocket, almost getting under so 2015 onwards.
Yeah, so the non-core is a catch-all for everybody else's technology. Okay. So they may not have fitted into that. The data was actually quite it was granular, so it was quite hard to condense it down into something that only had 6 areas. So, but yeah, non-core is the more open core type technologies where anybody can throw something in. But you can see that where we are, London and coming west, it's a hotspot down here for
Absolutely,
innovation,
yeah.
which is good for you to see. It shows that companies are doing something
Great for the
really well.
Thames Valley.
And Oxford, obviously, another great hotspot there.
Yeah.
So I always think that's quite an interesting.
Yeah, really interesting.
And we won't do that one. Okay, so I talked about the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. We're on wave 3 of that now. And you can see on the left-hand side where the clean areas are, and on the right-hand side a bit more detail and how they're going to spend the cash over the next 2 or 3 years. So AI and data, we are doing more and more with artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data analytics, scraping data off social media, looking for hotspots and understanding what's happening on a broader scale as opposed to what's just been reported in the news. Aging society, obviously we're all living longer, we all want to retire even earlier. And there is that disconnect between how much funding there is and who's going to look after all these elderly people. I'm fast getting there myself. Clean growth is all about basically decarbonising the economy. And the government has still got quite, they say they've got a strong agenda. I've yet to see how that manifests itself, seeing as being a bit of a bitter and twisted man here. I was a big fan of offshore renewable technology, so wave and tidal, and overnight they destroyed what could have been a 20 billion to 50 billion pound industry because they got rid of renewable obligation certificates, which are called ROCs, which really help these new technologies get put out into the small farms and out into the sea to be tested to something called contract for difference, and they destroyed that industry overnight.
Wow. And
yet they're trying to decarbonise it. They keep talking about it. So hopefully they'll address some of that and hope to improve it. And then future of mobility. So there's something called the Advanced Propulsion Centre, the APC. They've got a lot of money, which is all around driving the electric revolution, which is all to do with vehicles and decarbonising those, lightweighting, fuel cells, electric, autonomous vehicles as well. I actually said to my wife, she said, well, we live in the country, we're going to have to move to a town when we're old. So I said, no, because in 20 years time, we will have pods that the AI in the cloud will be saying, oh, Weissel, we need to have 2 pods there on average during the day. We'll want to go shopping. We'll just call up a pod. We can just sit there doing our crossword. Off we go, just tootling into town.
Yeah, you call it up on your phone, I imagine. I almost wonder if my son and daughter, who are very young, will even need to take a driving test. Will we own our cars in the future? And by the sounds of things are the way it's going, I think that's more and more unlikely.
Yeah. So the future of mobility, and especially for the older generation, is really quite an interesting area. Myself, I'm a petrol head. I'm dreading the day of the electric revolution in some respects. You can't beat the smell of the old-fashioned 4-star petrol.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is where they're going to be spending the money. And you can see on the right-hand side, there is quite a budget for doing this sort of stuff. And they will be releasing these themed competitions over the next 3 years. So if you've got technology that fits into those, you could go for the open smart call. You'd be better off waiting for one of these, because then you bang on the money with what they're looking for. And you're probably 4 times more likely to get funded going for a themed one that suits what you're doing. Okay, the Smart Grant, this is kind of the flagship. It is quite competitive, and I've got some numbers coming up on that. So they are looking for an innovative idea that leads to new products or processes. And what Innovate UK are interested in, instead of supporting perpetual companies that just innovate, they never put their head above the parapet to exploit it. You've got to have a strong delivery plan. They want you to be making money and paying tax. Bear in mind that 60% of the UK tax take is all around employment. They want your company to grow and employ people. The other 40% is your corporation tax and all the rest of it. As a note, every person, the dole, and you put into a £30,000 a year job is worth £20,000 to the taxman.
Wow.
That's why they love people being employed. So to give away 1% of corporation tax, 19% down to 18%, if you employ 100,000 people, you have more than paid for that corporation tax deduction. And yet it makes Britain a far better place to invest your money in if you're an outside person. There you go. I'll get off my bandwagon in a minute. So what they want is this return on investment, and the return on investment is both for the company, because they've got to chip some money in, and for the government. And so in your application, you can talk about job creation and all the rest of it. So these, they run every quarter. generally break it across 3 bits: feasibility studies, industrial research, and experimental development. And there should be a slide coming up on how much money you get. You need a minimum of a month, I think, to write a strong application. Ideally, you ought to be doing it now for the April deadline.
Why is it such a short window, and how long is this only just recently come about?
So this opened just before or just after Christmas.
But why do you think it's such a short deadline to get the applications in by the 22nd?
Because they run it every quarter.
Right. Okay.
And there's a bit of a heartbeat to that.
Okay.
So companies will be thinking, okay, I can't get my ducks in a row for this.
Yes.
But I can be talking to potential partners and get my funding in place, ready for the next round, which is likely to be 3 months after that.
Okay.
Okay. So this was the last round, February 19. So kind of last year. So we do a Freedom of Information Act release from Innovate UK to get this numbers. We have got a later one, but we haven't crunched them yet. So there were 1,100 applications, and only 93 were successful, so less than 10%. If you use a company such as ourselves to write your bid, that is more like 50% success, because you need to know how to pitch these things and the subtleties behind the questions they're asking. Some people are fantastic. Some companies just write all of them their own, and they are remarkably successful. My view would be, if you can afford it, at least get somebody to write your first one.
Yeah.
Because then you can see what they're doing and how they've done it, and then you can build on that yourself or continue to use somebody. There are 10 questions, each are marked out at 10. So you need to be getting every one of 5 assessors to be giving you 8 or 9 out of 10 in order to be successful. So we reckon you need currently about 83%, 84% to be guaranteed a successful application. And in that, the ones from February, you can see it was kind of 80% up to 91 was the maximum score they gave out. You had to be in that band to get supported. And the average grant was 342 grand there. So as I say, the smart grant is a catch-all for everybody's technology. Themed ones, instead of an 8.4% success rate, that might be put 40%.
Yeah.
Because less people are applying for a similar size pot of money. Then this is just a bit of detail in there. So we look at the length of the project. So the shorter ones, smaller value, was the bulk of the applications, but they actually supported 10% of those. The middle ones, 19 to 36 months, they only supported 4%. So you need to think to yourself, Innovate UK are looking for a shorter term win. So maybe you need to pitch your project out, instead of 2.5, you'd say, well, okay, well, let's make it a bit smaller and let's bang it out in 12 months, because that's a bit of a sweet spot.
Yeah.
You know, you're 2.5 times more likely to get funded. So these will all be available on the webinar online later anyway, won't they? So I won't dwell on them. How much money do you get? So left-hand side, you've got size of the business, small, medium, large. And then for each of the 3 on the right there, really the feasibility, etc., it's 70% funding. That's really good. Experimental development is meant to be, you're nearly ready to commercialize, just got some bits to do. A lot less innovation, hence they give you less money. And you can actually couple these grants with an R&D tax claim as well. So you can get up to another 10% towards this as well through an R&D tax claim. There's obviously a bunch of caveats in there. So you can get up to 80% funding on a project as a small business, which I think is absolutely remarkable.
It's incredible. Yeah. And we'll obviously be covering R&D a bit more in a couple of minutes.
Yeah. So that's how much money you get. People always come to me and say, Sam, we need 200 grand by next week. I say, well, that's a bit of a tough gig, I'm afraid. So this is a typical time scale. So 9th of Jan, competition opens. You start writing, as I say, absolutely a minimum a month before the deadline, just because there's a lot to do and you have to hone it into perfection, really. Goes in April. You get notified at the end of June. So April, May, June. So 8 weeks later, typically. It takes a month to sort out the contracts with Innovate UK. They will have questions about financial viability. You might have done this as a consortium. Consortiums are great because you're working with people up and down your supply chain. So you might have the pull from the market. You've got a bigger player on board who wants what you're doing. Let's get them in as a partner. But also going back into your supply chain, people who've got the technology perhaps you need, and they can also benefit. So you might have 3 people in a consortium or more. I think it's probably about 50-50 consortium against single company applications. But there's always this bit of bureaucracy about before you can get going. You then have to deliver a project before you make your first claim, and then Innovate UK typically pay you within a month. So, you know, from you thought about this in January, July you get going, July, August, September, October, November. It might be 10, 11 months until you actually see any money. And I've got, I think the next slide actually talks through the cash flow issue of running projects. If not, that's coming up.
But to get the money back in a month is a pretty good turnaround in my experience in dealing with these things.
Yeah. So typically if it's a reasonable size grant, on the first claim, you do have to get what's called an accountant's report. Now, if you're a good company, what you do, you get that teed up before the end of the 3 months. So it's boom, ready to go after that, the first week after that. If you're not quite on the ball, you can waste a lot of time trying to get that done. Not every grant asks for that, by the way. They always ask for an accountant's report at the end to prove that what you spent your money has been spent correctly, and not on your holiday in the Caribbean. So there we go. So this slide just kind of shows how much money do I need to run my project. So just look at the first column there, 250k project, you get 70% funded, 175. You're doing this as a year's project, and you get your first grant payment in month 4. You need 83k to get to that point. So with new start companies, you say, yeah, we need a grant, can we do it, blah, 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 blah. Have you got 83k? You know, and scale that up and down depending on how much you want to do. But if it's a 100k project, but we would like to see that you've got that either in the bank from investment, or that you're a trading company and those costs can be consumed within the business and not damage it too much. So this ought to do with sort of financial viability of the company. So that's quite useful. There's also something called a company in difficulty test, which has always been there in the sort of legislation for grants and the contracts. No one's ever applied it until about a year ago, when they thought, hang on, we've got a few projects that have gone pop. Why is that? And so this company in difficulty is for companies over 3 years old. And it's all to do with share capital and share premium. Share premium is where you've sold a share to an outside person who, instead of paying £1, has paid £10. So it's the uplift when somebody invests in your business. So on this example, we've basically sold 20,000 shares at £1 each, but a load of those have got a share premium where people have had to chip in a lot more money to buy the shares. So our total share capital is just over £1 million. What Innovate UK will look at is your accumulated losses to date have to be less than half of that value. And so the table on the right says how that works out. And it is literally, can be £1 either way. It's a bit of a bonkers acid test, if you ask me. And I have said to companies, okay, before you get your accounts done, just buy another £5 worth of shares if you think this is going to be the case to actually get over this problem. But they do review, this is kind of the heads up, but they will look at your cash flow, your balance sheet strength and long-term profitability as well as that. Under 3 years old, they don't bother. Okay, so some of the other funding schemes. Innovate UK is great. So 10 questions, scored out of 10, 5 assessors are typically, and the feedback you get is awesome.
Fantastic.
So every question, every assessor writes 2 or 3 sentences. And it will be, hasn't really described the market. There's no hard evidence that this market exists at this size, or talking about the competition. You know, it seems to have been a Google search done on the competition. What we want to see is actual companies, products, blah, blah. So they actually second bite at the cherry. You can go, okay, I can take all that learning from the feedback and make a far stronger application next time.
Excellent.
Unlike the European one, which is rubbish. But Innovate UK, they do a fantastic job on the feedback. It's really, really useful. Eureka is not part of Horizon 2020, but it is sort of the wider European area. So they'll do things like this down at the bottom there, UK-Israel collaboration. So both companies have agreed that they're going to chip some cash into this. Typically applied, I believe, through the Innovate UK portal. I might be wrong there. And so it's that same process that you go through. So you know there's proper rigor to it. Just out of interest, when you submit an application and it might have some patentable technology, applying for a grant is not public disclosure. It does not stop you getting a grant. Everybody who, the assessors and who sees this are under strict NDAs with Innovate UK. So it's absolutely buttoned up tight there. There is a public description, and it says, do not write anything in the public description that gives away your patents.
Right.
If you haven't applied for them yet, basically. So there is a public description, but you make that as vanilla as you can, really. The Defence and Security Accelerator, DESA, they good. They have theme competitions where it might be aiding people in the battlefield or more effective medicine, blah, blah, blah. But they also have an open call. So you might have some bit of technology that you want to introduce into the defence area. You can put it into the open call, which is open all the time. And the DESA funding is a contract to deliver. So you have to deliver that bit of innovation which you own. It's not a grant, and it's typically 100% funded. And they would typically run a competition and do 6 people, and then the 2 best, they might have access to £1 million.
Oh, wow.
The deal is, if you stop developing that technology, they have the right to take it from you and give it to somebody else to further it, because they've invested in it already. I think it's a great scheme. Some people get het up about, well, I don't want to support the defence industry, you know, killing people, but a lot of it's to do with homeland security and whatnot. So don't dismiss it, have a look at it. Some other stuff, certainly on the health side, the Eye for Eye programme on the left, a great scheme. There used to be an issue over IP ownership with the NHS, but they've stopped being stupid on that now, and the company does retain the IP. What's good about that is that you can use it to get access to get trials done. So it's quite good. Challenge awards, so they have different challenge areas and they have themes. Yeah, quite good. We do quite a few of those. Medical devices and all the rest of it. Digital health. Advanced Propulsion Centre, they did have an awful lot of money. You can see they're up to around 16, 17 now. They're quite a long way down. Some proper money. So we worked with a few people and got them 8 or 10 million.
Wow.
You know, some proper funds to make things happen. The Advanced Propulsion Centre, and you can go onto their website and it gives you a breakdown of exactly what they're looking for in different technology areas. The Aerospace Technology Institute, I think they're Anfield, I might be wrong. They are looking for you to work within your supply chain. That's all to do with doing technology for the marketplace. More local stuff. So the OXLEP, so that the LEP is a local economic partnership, and Thames Valley Berkshire is also another LEP. But have you got any sort of input on this, Gavin?
Yes, well, we work very closely with OXLEP, Thames Valley Berkshire LEP, Bucks Business First, and yeah, that we've run multiple projects with them, had a fantastic working relationship, and I would highly recommend checking out their website because there's always different pots of funding available. We've delivered projects on behalf of them on many occasions, and you just sometimes never know when there might be a pot of funding that becomes available, but they're very much business focused, and yeah, great to work with. Yeah.
And I think you're trying to make the application process as smooth as possible. From
we did, yes. We run an innovation funding scheme a couple of years ago, working in partnership with OXLEP, and one of the responses we had from the business community was a slight hesitance in the way that, you know, some expressed experiences in the past where the paperwork and the application process was really lengthy and then they didn't hear back, and we fed this back and they OXLEP listened. We were able to kind of create a simplified application, and businesses absolutely loved it, and the funds flew out the door, and that was all about developing the organisation and job creation. There were a few forms to fill in, but it was, you know, it was a really simple process.
You are spending government money at the
exactly. Yeah, there needs to be that paper trail.
Yeah. And then have I got to talk about?
I was going to ask you around this one, about. I don't think it's on this slide, but one I was going to ask you is about knowledge transfer partnerships.
Okay, so they are a great way of you basically get a postgraduate, and so I've got one at the moment in Leicester that we're putting together. He wants to do some AI stuff. He's a web company developer. You need somebody who knows a bit more about AI than the guys he's got at the moment. Leicester University has got quite a big school in computing science. So we're putting together a knowledge transfer partnership program which is a strategically important project for the company over 2 years. They pay for the postgrad, kind of £20,000 a year, but the government chips in kind of another 30,000 university to allow the university to work with the postgrad on that company's project. Access to cutting edge technology at the university with really strong connections with who's on your team. They sit with you. They don't typically sit in the university, they sit in the company, and they can work on that strategically project at really what is quite a cut you get. You usually go through this through the universities will all have a person, and there is also regional knowledge transfer people who help you do the application. We don't all we do is we help people get them set up. We don't.
Yeah.
But they're really good. I think we're time's moving on, isn't it?
Yeah.
I won't bother my cases. I'll run through. These are really 6 important points about writing an application. Understand the competition criteria. I would recommend that you do not try and warp your project to fit a particular core. You're better off either going into the open or waiting for a particular core that does what the project does. And there's no point putting something in that doesn't meet the criteria because you think it does, but it doesn't really. You're just kind of kidding yourself. You will fail at the gateway question. You fit the criteria. And that might be the technology area, what they want within that technology. It might be the total size of project that they allow. So if you're a pound over, you'll be thrown out.
Right.
And you've gone to all that effort of writing it. Attending the briefing event and register interest is important. You get to meet what's called the Innovate UK technology lead, and they're always a good person to bounce ideas from and kind of get that gladiatorial thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah.
Are we in scope with what we're trying to do? And they're usually really interested in helping companies. You also meet other people who you might choose to collaborate with, so you can go for a far bigger project. Really quite important, that is. One of the first things you need to do is get an agreed and costed project plan out, because that will actually give you your key work packages, or the costs involved in each of the work packages, what the milestones and deliverables are, what the distribution of who does what. If you get that agreed, you're getting commitment from your partners to join in the project. If you do that last thing, 2/3 of the application is all left a bit woolly. Getting that done early allows you to really get cracking. And I'd say the plan does drive that partner commitment. Answer all the questions. Bear in mind that the guidance for a question can be longer than the space you've got to answer it. But you to do that, I have no idea. So you've got to be really concise. My top tip is write your answer to the space available. Don't just write what you think you want to write and then try and edit it down. There's no point writing 3 pages when you've got to fit it into 1, because it will just come out as a load of rubbish. Try and write to the length of the question, that the space you've got. And this time for writing, editing, reviewing, uploading, really important. Less than a month, you are running out of time to do that and to really do the best application. Okay. Couple of examples. Still no questions. That's good. Probably because we're just so good at chatting about it, Gavin.
Obviously covering all the bases.
All the bases.
You guys do have the opportunity, if you want to submit a question, feel free to use the chat box. We'll obviously answer that. But we're moving into the murky world of R&D tax credits, which I find fascinating. So,
yeah. Okay. So these have been around for at least 15 years, I think, maybe longer.
And that's incredible, because I've worked for the Chamber for coming up 15 years. And I would say my experience, this has only really started to get some traction over the last 5 or so years. Yeah. And there's companies that have been set up purely dealing with R&D. And it just seems to really, as I say, got that traction of recent, which is incredible to say it's been around for 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And so up until 6-7 years ago, you could go back 4 or 5 years. You had a bigger window. You could go back and say, "Oh, we're doing any R&D." It's now just 2 years. Right. I've got a slide on that. So I think that's what kind of kick-started everybody's interest before that window closed. Right. Oh, we need to get all these done before that 5-year window closes. It's what it is. It's a scheme for small companies and large companies. There's 2 different schemes, and it's a way of basically reducing your tax bill. Hopefully, down if it goes below nothing, you can get cash back. So it's a really powerful way of rewarding companies who have innovated. And so I've got a really easy example after this slide. What has happened is successive governments have improved the scheme. So, for instance, what's called the uplift for an SME started at 75%. For every pound you spent on R&D, you knock 75 pence off your profit. That's now £1.30 for every pound that you spent. And so, yeah, and that's improved last sort of 15 years. What the Conservatives have said is they're going to large company scheme from 12 to 13%. So which is 8 or 9% improvement, which is worth a lot of money. There's an issue with what you can claim under R&D as regards cloud computing and data, because they say that's not it's not a material, it's not a subcontractor, it's not a person, therefore you can't claim it. But they're trying to recognise the fact that there's an awful lot goes on in the cloud. They've just not moved with the times, basically. And this is their commitment to try and get a bit closer to being up to date. Under the SME scheme, because you can cash in losses, and I'll come on to that in a minute, for cash into back off the tax man that you've never paid him, it used to be unlimited. And there was a few nefarious people who took real advantage of that illegally. And so typical reaction, instead of addressing the problem by actually doing proper rigor of their checks, they've decided to change the scheme.
Right.
So there's a consultation at the moment that you can only get back 3 times what you've paid in national insurance and pay as you earn tax.
Okay.
So basically what you've paid as a tax times 3 is what you can get back as cash.
Okay.
Instead of being unlimited. And the idea of why they went this unlimited bit was they said new start companies employ a lot of subcontractors because they don't have the skills in-house and they don't want to employ people and have that long-term burden to begin with. And the scheme was altered to say, okay, we recognise that, therefore you can make all this big claim. But some people were just coming up with made up fictitious invoices from places overseas that you've never heard of. And, they reckon there's £300 million worth of fraud out of a budget of 2.4 billion. So this is to get around that.
I see.
So I can say in some respects, we did an analysis on all our clients and only one of them would have been affected marginally by the introduction of this. So, they're the changes coming up. 2 schemes, the SME scheme. So for grants, an SME is below 250. For tax, it's below 500. The RDEC scheme, the Research and Development Expenditure Credit, by the way, that's for over 500, or for SMEs who have done work on behalf of a large company, or for SMEs who have had a grant. So you'd fall then onto the right-hand side. But you can split your R&D. So if you're an SME, you've had a grant, let's ring fence those costs, do it under RDEC. The rest of the R&D in the company, let's do it under the SME scheme. So you can slice and dice it as you wish. So if you're profitable, it basically saves you 26 pence in the pound off your tax bill. And if you're loss making, you can cash losses in at 33 pence in the pound is the maximum you can get to. And you can go back 2 full years, including your current one. I've got a slide on that. I'm really going to focus on the SME scheme, really. So what does that mean? So in the middle there, no R&D claim. You got some turnover, you got some costs. We've identified the R&D element, and we've made some profit. Always good. And let's say tax rate's 20%, which it was a couple of years ago. You would pay £6,000 of tax on that, and then you got 24 grand towards your holiday in the Caribbean. If we make an R&D claim, we take our 20% and we times it by this 130%, which is a number dictated to us by the government, by HMRC. Okay. We can't change that 130%. And we take that 26 grand off our profit. So our new profit for tax is only £4,000. So we only pay £800 of tax.
Right.
Instead of 6,000. So we're 500 bit grand better off, which is 26%.
Fantastic.
And I've got another example later on where we go into the scenarios if you're break even or loss making. So in the simplest example, that's what it means. It does save you a bundle of tax.
Absolutely, yes, extremely compelling. But what's the criteria? Are you able to give us some, some examples of what the criteria is?
Where does the cash go in the last couple of years? And that's by region. You can see that London and the southeast and the east of England around Cambridge are the big swallowers up, because Oxford falls under southeast, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah, that's why that's quite large. Number of claims, the rump of them are down at the smaller end. There's a few over at the big end. So we work with two-man bands. We work with PLCs. The biggest PLC has got 21,000 people, and their claim is right over on the right-hand side. What's interesting is for consultancy companies, I forgot what I was going to say. To the question, but that's coming.
Sorry, I got all excited.
Some consultancy companies will say, well, actually, because we can claim R&D on our research to deliver this piece of consultancy, and I know it's going to be a really competitive bid, if I think I can be getting 26 pence back in the pound on a lot of my R&D that I'm doing for this contract, I can actually bid at a slightly lower cost with a lower margin because I'm going to claw it back on the R&D tax side. So some savvy companies do that instead of just going out fully commercial. Right, we've got a question. What are the preconditions to claim tax return? Is necessary to be included in the funding program? So you do not. So a company can just spend what it wants on its R&D. You don't need to be part of a funding program. You have to write it's not legal, but it's highly suggested that you write a technical report on what you've done. And I've got the criteria for that coming up. So that tells HMRC what you've done that was difficult. And I'll go to that in a minute. And what you do, you have to wait till the end of the year. In your annual accounts, you then do the R&D claim, and that's when it all goes through sort of 3 or 4 months after your year end. And if you're going to get a cash back, you typically get that within 6 weeks of making the claim. So my view would be, if you think you're going to get cash back, ignore what your accountant says about let's leave it a few months until I get around to doing it. You say to them 2 weeks before your year end, I want you doing my accounts now, and I want them in by the end of next month. And actually, let's get this R&D tax claim in it, and let's get the cash in my account so I can use it.
Absolutely.
Most accountants, I apologise if there's any accountants out there, do not push their clients to get it done quickly.
Why do you think that is?
Because you have to have got them done within 9 months to submit to Companies House for the public record of where you are with your business, and to HMRC within 12 months. So they just rely on lastminute.com.
Yeah.
You know, whereas if I'm getting cash back, I want it back within 6 weeks of my year end. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
No reason why they can't do that. And if accountant charges you £4,000, they want to make £1,000 a day. That's 4 days work. Yes, Mr. Accountant, you can fit 4 days working in the next month, can't you, for me? No, well, I'm going to go to somewhere else. So you can be quite bullish with them.
Absolutely. Thanks for that question, Lewis.
Yeah, thank you. So total claimed. So there's quite a lot. 2.4 billion. I think we have to click on that. There we go. 2.4 billion budget at the moment, and it goes up every year. This kind of shows. I'll let people look at that at their leisure because time's cracking on. Where are we?
Got about 8 minutes left.
Oh, blimey. This is the timeline. So we're in sort of January coming into Feb 2020. Yeah, so above the current year, above the R there. We can look at this year, and we need to claim that by the end of December this year. If we don't look at the 2018 year, we lose it. And I've had conversations with companies saying, Ray, you need to do a claim. If you don't get it done by the end of April, you will lose it.
Miss it.
Oh, I'm busy, sir. And you chase and chase and chase, and he doesn't make a claim. And you say, Ray, you've just lost tens of thousands back. He says, oh, no, I was busy. I said, but you only make 30,000 profit a year anyway. This would have doubled your profit for 1 day of your time helping me.
Yeah.
Surely that is, instead of you employing 12 people to get you £30,000 profit, I needed 1 day of your time, and you were too busy.
To make the time.
Make the time. Make the time. So, yeah, there we go. So in that early year, you would put in what's called an amended corporation tax computation and a CT 600, which is the form that goes to HMRC. Okay, so we've got 2 years plus the current one. What can we do with that? Depending on what it does to your profit, you can get cash back up to 33p in the pound. You can extend your losses. So if next year you think you're going to have an absolutely bumper year and you're going to make heaps of cash, you can put those losses into your next year. So it takes out your tax in the next year. Personally, I would always take cash today because you don't know what's happening around the corner.
Absolutely.
And if you've got cash in your pocket, you can spend that on marketing. You can spend it on finishing off your R&D instead of relying on getting cash from elsewhere. Tax rebate for previous years. So you couldn't go back 2 years, you might have paid a pile of tax. Let's get that back in your pocket. And again, in your current year, it might just give you a tax reduction. And like most good companies, most companies save their tax in the month that they do the sale, don't they?
Yeah.
No, they don't. They rely on 2 months' profit when they need to pay the tax bill to pay the tax. But if you've saved your tax during the year, it releases all of that cash back into your cash flow.
Fantastic.
On a tax reduction. So what we got here?
We've got another question here from Joe. So what information would a potential lender require sites of to evidence the robustness of the claim?
Yeah.
So for a lender, a loan may be advanced and secured against the tax credit. So what steps might they take to ensure a claim is accurate and complete?
Okay, so what we're looking at here is it might not be that profitable business, and a lender looks at the affordability of you paying back that loan, the interest and the capital repayment. And so you can do a cash flow forecast that includes an R&D claim, which improves the cash in your business, which might help to prove that you can pay it back despite not being that profitable. So in answer to your question there, Joe, if you've got a record of having done R&D tax claims, you can use that. There is something, they might be stopping it, but there's something called advanced assurance. So if you've not made a claim before, you can go to HMRC and say, this is my tech over the next 3 years. This is what I'm going to be doing. Can I get advanced assurance? I think they've done 360 of those in 2 years. Absolutely tiny amount, but you can do that. And that would give a lender perhaps a level of comfort that you are going to be able to get a claim in the future. You could say that we're going to use an independent body to do, got a really fantastic success rate. So we're quite confident. And what you might say, actually, we think we're going to claim 100K, but to be prudent, let's put it at 75. So you say to your lender, and we've only used 75% of the claim. So we've got that headroom. And if that still makes the numbers look good, you're good to go. What HMRC look for is they have algorithms that look at the size of the claim, the age of the business, and businesses in your sector and what they've claimed. And they're looking for outliers. And if you are an outlier because you're making an absolutely whopping claim, they might investigate a bit heavily. Yeah. They do go through quite a lot of checks on the quality of the technical report and on the numbers side. But Joe, I think you could do it through advanced assurance, or with perhaps using a third party to do it for you, or saying that you've had a word with a third party and they're going to do like a 2-day check of what we've done. Fantastic. So you can still do it yourself to save paying any fees, but you just pay them to do a check of it. Okay. And I do that for a company.
Excellent. Thanks again for that question, Joe. Right.
Okay, we need to get a wiggle on. So that's how we can use it. What is R&D for tax purpose? It's to seek and advance in the overall knowledge or capability in a field of science or technology. Now, what you need to understand there, and there needs to be some uncertainty as to how you get there. If I connected Outlook to a website back in the day, nobody had done that, and it certainly wasn't in the public domain. I've heard on the blogs that somebody's done it, and you think, well, that can be done. So, but it's not, nobody's telling you how to do it, so you've got to re-engineer all that and understand it yourself. So although it's not new overall, because it's so tightly wrapped up in each little company who's ever done it, it's new to you, you can make a claim.
My understanding was, and that almost the word is, it's bespoke.
Yeah, so there's bespoke, so it's where there's been a technical challenge. Yeah. It's really made you scratch your head. It's not so, what we often say is that you're doing a complex website for somebody, 60% might be on the tricky stuff. Yeah. 40% of what you've done is just the run of the mill, setting it up, doing the database schema at the back end, blah, 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 doing the front end UI. But there's a 6% is the really tricky bit where you're pulling in, having to write APIs to link in with external data sources. That would be good stuff. 40% is run of the mill, so we don't claim that. Right, okay. So it's taking a pragmatic view, right, about what is the tricky bit that you've done. Okay, so this is some typical stuff. So solving a technical problem, that's scratching your head. New processes. What we're looking for this new process and new and updated product is a bit of a step change. So not an incremental improvement, a step change with what you had before. And what a lot of companies forget about is, I'm supplying beds to the NHS, but I've developed a software system to manage all those assets. You can make a claim on the development of your own bespoke system in-house. Yeah. And we actually did that. Did not only claim on the claim for the software that they use to manage all their assets was actually 10 times the size. Fantastic. Because we ask questions and we understand what we're doing. as you said earlier, Gavin, lab coats, maybe with the beard and the sandals and the socks, get the fashion police out on that. Prototypes, it is all that, of course it is. It's also what I call the engineers.
Yeah.
So it's the people who then make that happen in the real world. And there's some stuff there. First in class is you've been paid to develop a piece of kit, but it's cost you, you've not made much margin on it. And so you can claim a great big chunk of that as R&D. And really where we pitch it is it costs you 50 grand to do the first one. If you made 10, what would number 10 be? 20k.
Okay.
So there's 30k of R&D buried in the first class. So prototype tooling is quite interesting. You might then go on, so you can write that off within your claim. And so plastic injection molding is expensive. Of course, you might then tweak it to be a full-time tool, but you can actually write off the bulk in your claim. And you can use the management input to it. What it isn't is this stuff, which the disability police would tell me off for doing blue on red. I apologise for that. So you can't have IP processing, writing of patents and submitting and pursuing them. You can't have cosmetic, and it's the fluffy hand waving stuff around the sides, really. Rent and rates brought in because you can't have an R&D facility without paying rent and rate, so it is a real cost. And I think concept and idea analysis is definitely part of the journey. So if you look at this slide, over at the left is initial technical and commercial research. Unless you know what you're going to develop, you know, it is a definite, doing that is definitely part of a project. So these are the 4 key projects, and that graph, anything under there, in my view, should be considered for an R&D claim. And obviously, core of it is rollout. A lot of the innovation has been done, a lot of the technical risk has disappeared, so it tails off. So for me, at the left-hand side, you can have that initial stuff. Costing areas, staff experience. We can't use dividend payments in an R&D claim. It has to be paid staff. So if it's a director, he pays himself 10 grand a year, pay as you earn, to keep his NI contributions up to get his state pension, and he pays himself £30,000 divvy. We can't use the dividend.
Right.
It's pay as you earn people. Subcontractors and what are called externally provided workers. If you get contractors in, we can use that. Software to make everything happen, and then materials that you use. So I won't go through IP ownership. So here's a worked example. Company, 100k on R&D, 300k net profit, don't make a claim, they pay 60k tax. If we now make a claim, they've saved 26 grand in tax. So that's quite a sizable sum to have released back in. 26% of your R&D activity. Break even, what happens here is we've still got 100k of R&D, we've got no profit, we have our uplift, which we take off the profit, we're now lost for tax £130,000, and we can cash that in at 14.5%. That's another number from HMRC, we can't change that. So they actually get 18,000 on the tax man. And what the beauty of this scheme is, it is not competitive. They have a budget and they've never run out. If you've done the technology and your report stacks up, you will get the money. Whereas the grant, as we've seen, only 10% gets supported because they either don't cut the mustard. So you get a cashback. If you've made a loss of 100k, take off our 130 uplift, we've now lost for tax 230 grand. We cash all of that in, we get 33 grand back.
Wow.
A third of what you've invested in R&D. And it really is there to encourage companies to do this. Or you could say, oh, those losses, let's put them through into next year. And we save 46 grand in tax. So yeah.
Extremely attractive.
Cash it money today so I can invest in marketing and whatnot. What's this one? Yeah, this is, I talked about this earlier. This is about 3 times the total of the national insurance. That just explains it in a bit more detail. Only about 2 slides to go, and we're 4 minutes over. That's not too bad. Consider the work you've done and completed for clients. So if I've done a piece of work for a client and they want to own the IP, quite often 50 to 70%, it's how to deliver their solution. And 30% is me taking that learning to build their solution that they then go off and own. So that 60, 70% of you learning, I would suggest you can claim. and you actually get your tax back on that, your tax reduction. The 30 or 40% you've done for a client, depending on the client, you can either claim nothing or 10%.
Excellent.
So consider what you've done for other people. New production lines are a classic area that people always forget, because they just think, well, we put it in, we've commissioned it, off we go. Lots of problems can arise. You've got to extraction to fit with the latest VOC regulation. That was an absolute nightmare because of this, that, and the other. I had to tweak it for us. Fantastic. Let's capture all of that. Let's put it through. Compliance with legislation can lead to innovation and hence R&D tax. We do see not all accountants understand the subtleties of the scheme and will tell their clients they can't make a claim because of that.
Yeah, I've heard that a few times.
Some accountants are brilliant. Some accountants are clear. And then they make so many mistakes in doing the number crunching in the tax computation and the CT600 that we have to then put right.
Right.
So, some accountants are great, some aren't. I get it checked with a third party whether it's worth you making a claim. And if you've had a project grant funded or you've been paid for it, still likely you can claim some R&D tax for yourself as well. So all good stuff. Just a couple of examples. And I've covered a bit of patent box. So that's it. Some of our clients, some household names there, a bit of asset straight, questions and answers.
Fantastic. Well, we've had a couple of questions throughout. I'm conscious we have overrun ever so slightly. If anyone does have a final question, do tee it up for us now. I've got two that just came to mind. Probably an obvious one, but does my company need to be registered with the Companies House?
Yeah. So the criteria is that your company, if it makes a profit, would pay corporation tax.
Okay.
So a limited liability partnership cannot, because that does not pay corporation tax. It's the entities that own the limited liability that end up paying tax.
Yeah.
So they can make a claim, but not the limited liability.
Okay.
But if that's owned by individuals, they don't pay corporation tax. They just pay personal tax. They can't make a claim.
Right. Okay.
So in the construction industry, you often get joint ventures, and they are two limited companies to do a JV to deliver a project. The two limited companies can make a claim. Oh, okay. And we proportion it out.
Now, thinking of Thames Valley Chamber ourselves, we've invested a lot in our membership. We're a not-for-profit organisation. Developed our own website, so there's a lot of bespoke stuff that's gone on around that. It's not an off-the-shelf product. We've also developed our internal CRM system. So are we in a position to make a claim?
They are classic projects. Technology size stacks up for a claim. So we've just done a big claim for a not-for-profit organisation up in north of Scotland, and because they do make a surplus and they would pay tax on that surplus. So you try not to make profit, you're trying to reinvest it, but you will be declared a profit. So liable to tax should you declare a profit, then yes, you can make a claim.
Right. Okay.
So it's worth a look at that.
Yeah,
I mean, there
absolutely.
might be some hidden bits that you might. Charities can be a limited company. There are some quirky bits, but on the whole, that would be definitely worth looking at for a claim.
Fantastic. Excellent. I think that pretty much takes us up to the end. So I hope you've all found that very useful. Certainly learnt a thing or two. We've got Sam's details at the beginning of the session. Before I wrap up, I just want to mention that we as a Chamber of Commerce have invested heavily into the membership. So we've moved from what was an old employee-based system over to now a value. If you're not a chamber member, by all means, you can join at a variety of different tiers to take advantage of solutions there to help your organisation. So regardless of what size, if you export, if you're a sole trader, or if you're looking to engage with larger businesses, then there's a variety of different options for you. In our website, we're there to help businesses around profile raising. If you're looking to obviously raise the profile and connect with other businesses, if you're an exporter, there's a range of different services for you to use. If you're looking to save money and protect your business, again, there's a range of different solutions. Do check out our website. It's really exciting. We're really pleased with the outcome. It really just leaves us to say a huge thank you to Sam here at TBAT. One who's wondering what TBAT stands for, go on, Sam. Let us know.
Okay, so when we first set the company up 17 years ago, by the way, I've never been rewarded for having done my 10 years, 15 years, coming up to 20 years. I'm hoping for a hog roast and a barbecue, but it's
We'll
never
get you a
happened.
carriage clock.
Yeah. When we set it, we were the business advice team.
Oh, there we go.
But then as we grew the company, we were working for bigger and bigger people.
Right.
You can't really go in and say I'm the business advice team. So
I see.
Major branding exercise, we just use the 4 letters.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, it's been really fun. Thank you for everyone who's joined us. Do check out our website. There's a lot of other events on the horizon. We'll be running more and more webinars as the year develops. But thank you very much, Sam. Thank you, TBAT, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.